Good. Good job, well done. Ika. Well done. Hazika. Hazika, what's this? You have an F. Many times I told you not to do the same mistake again. This is the last time I tell you to do the same thing.
Assalamualaikum and a very good day. At first glance, this scenario may appear to reflect disciplinary authority. However, under tort law, intentional physical contact such as slapping may constitute battery, particularly where it exceeds what is considered reasonable. Corporal punishment remains practiced in various settings, including schools, homes, and institutional environments, and is often justified as a method of behavior control. In Malaysia, the lack of clear civil case law creates uncertainty as to when such disciplinary actions cross the boundary into unlawful battery. This presentation therefore examines how tort law determines the threshold between permissible discipline and actionable battery. Thank you.
Battery is defined as the intentional and direct application of force upon another person without their consent. To establish battery, there are 4 elements that need to be fulfilled. First, the defendant must have intention, as negligent acts alone are insufficient, as held in Letang against Cooper. Second, the act must be voluntarily and within the defendant's control, as illustrated in Gibbons against Pepper. Third, there must be direct contact with the plaintiff clothes or body with hostile behavior. As clarified in Wilson against Pringles, friendly or accidental touching does not amount to battery. So lastly, the battery can be established where consent exists. In Collins against Wilcox, consent is presumed by the ordinary touch that generally acceptable in our everyday life. In Malaysia, corporal punishment is not expressly banned, but it's subject to legal regulation. In schools, the Education School Discipline Regulations 1959 permit corporal punishment only for boys, limit to light caning, and restrict its administration to the head teacher, with all punishment required to be officially recorded. Under Section 31 of the Child Act 2001, acts that cause physical or emotional harm to children are criminalized. In penal institutions, whipping is permitted for youthful offenders under Section 50 of Prison Act, Section 288 subsection 4 and Section 293 of Criminal Procedure Code. But this punishment excludes female in Section 289. The death penalty is strictly prohibited in Section 97 of the Child Act. While Section 89 of the Penal Code provides a defence of reasonable chastisement that permit corporal punishment carried out in good faith, which applies to parents, guardians, and caregivers. Corporal punishment remains widely practiced in Malaysia across different settings. At home, approximately 2/3 of children experience violent punishment, while about 52% of students report being caned in schools. There is also clear gender disparity, as boys are more frequently subjected to physical punishment, while girls are more likely to experience verbal abuse.
The research adopts a qualitative legal methodology focusing on non-empirical legal sources. The study primarily analyzes statutes, case law, academic writings, and official guidelines to examine the principles governing battery and lawful justification, particularly in the context of corporal punishment. Data collection relies on relevant Malaysian statutes, namely the Education Act of 1996, the Child Act 2001, and the Penal Code, as well as Ministry of Education guidelines on corporal punishment. In addition, the research examines English and other Commonwealth case law alongside the international instruments such as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Analysis, a qualitative and comparative approach is applied. Key judicial decisions are analysed to identify the ratio decidendi and the test used to distinguish lawful discipline from unlawful battery. The analysis focuses on 5 elements, which is intention, direct physical contact, reasonableness, necessity, and the proportionality of force. The study acknowledged several limitations, including the limited Malaysian case law, reliance on persuasive foreign authorities, the non-binding nature of ministry guidelines, and the absence of empirical data. In tort law, battery is a form of trespass to the person and is actionable per se, meaning that no proof of actual damage or injury is required for a claim to succeed. The first element is attention. The defendant must have attended to the physical act. Accidental contact falls under negligence, not battery. The second is direct contact. Force must be applied directly or through an object controlled by the defendant, for example, a cane. The next is unlawfulness. The contact must lack lawful justification. And the last one is the consent barrier. In cases of corporal punishment, consent is rarely a valid defense, as minors are generally deemed to lack the legal capacity consent to physical harm. Malaysia utilizes a dual regulatory and statutory approach to physical discipline. In educational regulation, caning is permitted for male students only and must follow strict procedural safeguards in specific locations like palms and buttocks. In statutory protection, like in Child Act 2001, criminalizes act likely to cause physical or emotional injury, as mentioned in Section 31. In Penal Code, Section 319 and 320 define hurt and grievous hurt, which can lead to criminal liability even if the intent was disciplinary, while in Section 89 mentioned that provides a good faith defense for parents, though this is increasingly scrutinized. The common law reasonableness test originating from R against Hopley. This test dictates that corporal punishment is only lawful if it is moderate, reasonable, and corrective.
So now we will discuss when does corporal punishment becomes battery. We will look into the thresholds of liability. There are multi-factor analysis to determine when discipline crosses into battery. The first one being severity. Bruises, welts, other dangerous objects are prima facie evidence for battery. The second one being the purpose. The law distinguishes between genuine correction and aggression. The third one being anatomical boundaries. Certain places like the face, the head, the chest are immediate risk for the person. The fourth one being procedure compliance. In schools, any deviation against the regulations of the administration negates any legal defense. Now we will look into how Malaysia compares globally in terms of legal model of corporal punishment. As you can see, more countries like the UK, Australia, Singapore, Canada are shifting to more stricter, defined tort regulations, whereas Malaysia still remains a significant outlier. There's this ongoing debate between the more traditional corporal punishments and the modern standards of protection. Article 19 of the UNHCR requires protection from all forms of violence, which sometimes conflicts with the Malaysian statute. Also, there is evidence of psychological impact that links between physical force to increased aggression, cognitive impairments, and a breakdown of trust. So there is social evolution where traditions are outdated, where we find a better alternative that does not require physical force.
Due to the legal uncertainty surrounding corporal punishment under tort law, this study proposes several reform recommendations aimed at clarifying legal thresholds and strengthening accountability. Firstly, legislative and policy reforms are required. This includes defining excessive force as statute, amending the Child Act, and introducing clear disciplinary guidelines to distinguish lawful discipline from tortious battery. Administrative safeguards are equally important. Mandatory legal training, proper documentation of disciplinary incidents, and internal review of mechanisms can help reduce excessive force and promote accountability within institutions. Judicial clarification is also necessary due to limited Malaysian tort case law. Courts should adopt a structured test for reasonable force, particularly in cases involving minors, to ensure consistency and legal certainty. Finally, the adoption of non-violent disciplinary models such as restorative justice, positive behavior support, and conflict resolution strategies can reduce reliance on physical punishment while promoting long-term behavioral change.
The boundary between disciplinary correction and the action of torts of law hinges on the principle of reasonableness. Landmark cases demonstrate that transition from discipline to liability is often blurred and vague. To ensure the protection of a child, Malaysia needs to move towards a more stricter regulation and clear tort law guidance.